The judge, an elderly man named Arthur Klein, who had been on the bench for 30 years and whose face looked as if the weight of each case had been etched into his face, looked down at the black woman standing in the dock. She had sat silently for nearly 2 hours of the trial, listening intently, her eyes taking in every detail as the two police officers, the heroes of the day, gave their testimony. "Miss Williams," Judge Klein said, his voice steady, with a certain weariness. "The court has heard testimony from Officer Gallo and Officer Novak, charging you with possession of a Schedule II controlled substance and resisting arrest. The prosecutor has finished his presentation. Before the court renders its decision, would you like to make a closing statement?" The woman, known to the courtroom as Elaine Williams, raised her head. All morning she had worn a mask of nervousness and confusion, but now that veil seemed to be drawn back for the first time. There was a fire in her calm eyes, a fire of sharp intelligence and unwavering purpose. She looked directly at the two officers. Officer Mark Gallo, the older and more smug one, smirked at her. Officer Chris Novak, the younger one, avoided her gaze. Then she looked back at the judge. "Your Honor, I do," she said clearly. Her voice, no longer trembling with fear, now echoed in the surprisingly quiet courtroom, each word pronounced with perfect precision. "But not as the defendant." She slowly reached into the inside pocket of her dress shirt. It was a slow, deliberate movement that drew the attention of everyone in the room. She didn't take out a note or a handkerchief. She pulled out a black leather wallet, a simple bifold. She opened it, and under the pale fluorescent lights of the courtroom, a shiny gold badge flashed, reflecting the light and seeming to radiate power of its own. "And as Inspector Evelyn Reed, of the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice." If a bomb had gone off in the courtroom, it could not have caused a more sudden and complete silence. The whispering of the lawyers, the rustling of papers, the coughing of a man in the back row, all stopped. Gallo and Novak looked at each other, their faces suddenly as white as sheets. The smirk on Gallo's lips froze and then shattered. He looked as if he had swallowed a toad. Novak's mouth dropped open, his eyes wide with bewilderment and utter fear. The judge squinted, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing and hearing. The young district attorney, who had just declared so eloquently that no one is above the law, looked as if he were about to faint. How did a federal investigator end up on the receiving end of a district court trial in a small, run-down town like Northgate? Was this an incredible mistake, or part of a much larger scheme, one that no one in this room could have imagined? And what happens when the prey, the seemingly helpless and isolated black woman, suddenly sheds her sheepskin and reveals herself to be the leader of the pack? To understand this shocking turn of events, we must go back 6 weeks, to the day Evelyn Reed first set foot in Northgate. Northgate is a place that America seems to have left behind. The steel mills that were once the pride and lifeblood of the city are now giant rusting skeletons on the banks of a polluted river. Unemployment is consistently in the double digits. The small wooden houses that once housed hard-working workers are dilapidated, their paint peeling, their lawns overgrown with weeds. A sense of hopelessness and discontent permeates the cracked streets. In such an environment, corruption often finds fertile ground to grow, taking root in every aspect of public life. And the Northgate Police Department, NGPD, is a prime example. For years, the Department of Justice, DOJ, had received a steady stream of complaints from Northgate. They told the same sad story: needless stops, planted evidence, excessive force, and a systematic pattern of harassment targeting minorities and the poor. But outside investigations always came to a standstill. The NGPD was a fortress of silence, protected by a solid blue wall of silence and cover-ups. Officers were more loyal to each other than to their oaths. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses were intimidated. Complaints were lost. Evelyn's superiors in Washington, D.C., knew that to breach this wall, they couldn't use a hammer. They needed something that could slip through the cracks. They needed a ghost. That's why Inspector Evelyn Reed was sent. Evelyn was one of the Civil Rights Division's best undercover investigators, a specialist in long, complex operations. She was a master at blending in, building cover, and gathering evidence in the most unlikely places. She had not arrived at Northgate as a federal investigator with power and public support. She had arrived as Elaine Williams, a freelance writer looking for a quiet, inexpensive place to finish her historical romance novel. The cover was perfect. It explained her presence in the uninspiring area, her curiosity about local life, and the fact that she spent a lot of time alone writing or looking for inspiration. She rented a small, one-bedroom apartment in an old brick building in a working-class neighborhood. The smell of boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes wafted down the hallway. She bought a used 2012 Toyota Camry for $4,500 cash. It had a few scratches and the paint was slightly faded. Perfect. She dressed casually, usually in jeans, a t-shirt, and a sweatshirt. She shopped at the local grocery stores, got coffee at the same coffee shop every morning, and greeted her neighbors with a smile. She was invisible, part of the scene, a harmless, single black woman trying to get by. But behind that ordinary exterior was a razor-sharp mind and a terrifying patience. The work required enormous sacrifice. It was lonely. It was dangerous. Every day was a drama, every conversation a calculation. She couldn't call her family, couldn't see her friends. Elaine had no family or friends nearby. Evelyn's motivation came from more than an abstract sense of justice. It was personal. 15 years earlier, when she was a young lawyer, her beloved cousin, a kind young man named Kevin, had been framed for drugs by 2 corrupt Baltimore cops during a traffic stop. He spent 2 years in a harsh state prison before a local newspaper investigation and an FBI sting exonerated him. Those 2 years had ruined his life. He came out of prison broken and never really recovered. Evelyn has vowed to dedicate her career to ensuring no other family has to endure that pain. Northgate is her latest battle, and she will not fail. While Evelyn was quietly building her network, getting to know the locals, listening to their stories in bars, churches, and laundromats, Officer Mark Gallo and Officer Chris Novak were going about their daily jobs. Gallo, a 38-year-old with a red face and a bulging beer belly, was a master at abusing the system. He had been on the force for 15 years, long enough to know every loophole, every regulation, and how to twist them to suit his own ends. He despised the people he was supposed to protect, especially the poor and minorities. To him, they were not citizens with rights, but numbers, targets to help him meet his arrest quotas and make more money. Novak, his younger partner, only 27, was initially hesitant. He had joined the police with vague ideals about helping people, but he was also a softie, eager to please his seniors and afraid of being singled out. Gallo was quick to school him. "Listen, kid," Gallo had told Novak during their early days on patrol together. "The world isn't like the academy. This is a jungle. You have to be tough. You have to be smart. You have to know the rules. This is how the system really works. How you survive and make a little extra money for your family." Novak, with student loans and a young child at home, quickly accepted the truth. His silence became complicity, and complicity gradually became active participation. Their system was simple and effective. They had a favorite hunting spot at the corner of 4th and Pine, a low-income area. There was an old stop sign, partially obscured by the branches of a large oak tree that no one in the city had bothered to trim. They would park their patrol car in a nearby alley and wait. When a car didn't come to a full stop, literally 3 seconds, the wheels stopped rolling. They would turn on their lights and give chase. Their targets were not random. They ignored luxury cars or wealthy-looking white drivers. Gallo knew those would call a lawyer immediately. They targeted beat-up cars, tired-looking workers after a long day, and especially blacks and Hispanics. Gallo called them easy clients, people he believed could not afford a good lawyer, did not know their rights, and were too scared to stand up to 2 armed police officers. Once the car was stopped, the drama began. Gallo would always find a reason to search the car. He might say he smelled marijuana, an unprovable lie. Or he would use aggressive behavior to provoke the driver, then accuse them of resisting in order to get a search. And if he didn't find anything, sometimes he would create something himself. He had a business relationship with a towing company called Northgate Towing and a bail attorney named Sal. Every arrest, whether it resulted in a conviction or not, brought money into the network. Towing fees, storage fees, bail fees. It was a small money machine, lubricated by fear and injustice. And all of this was covered up by Deputy Chief Frank Donovan. Donovan, 55, was a conniving man who had risen to the top by building a loyalty network based on corruption and cover-ups. He protected productive officers like Gallo from public complaints. In return, Gallo and others were unquestioningly loyal to him, ensuring the department's arrest numbers looked good and ensuring a portion of the profits from illegal activities were funneled discreetly upward. After 6 weeks of observing, recording, and gathering initial information, Evelyn decided it was time to act. She had enough circumstantial evidence. Now she needed direct, undeniable evidence. She needed to experience the system for herself. She needed to become the prey. On a Tuesday afternoon, she drove her Toyota Camry toward the corner of 4th and Pine. She knew Gallo and Novak were there. She had tracked their schedules and overheard their conversations through a long-range listening device. She turned on a small recording pen and slipped it into her shirt pocket. Her car, which had been prepared by a DOJ technical team 2 nights earlier in a secret garage, was equipped with 4 high-definition hidden cameras and omnidirectional microphones. One was in the front bumper, one in the rear bumper, one in the right side mirror, and a wide-angle camera hidden in a vent on the dashboard covered the entire interior of the car. Everything was ready. When she approached the stop sign, she did it perfectly by the book. She came to a complete stop. The wheels stopped rolling. She counted silently. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Then she slowly started moving. The red and blue lights on the patrol car's roof immediately lit up. The siren let out a short, piercing whistle. Evelyn pulled over, her heart beating a little faster, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The show was on. Gallo walked to the window, his face a familiar grimace. He rapped hard on the glass. Evelyn rolled it down. "Do you know why I stopped you?" Gallo asked, his usual question. "No, officer," Evelyn replied politely, her voice modulated with a hint of false concern. "You didn't come to a complete stop at the stop sign." Gallo lied smoothly. "Driver's license and registration?" Evelyn handed him the papers. When he returned to his patrol car to check them, she knew what was coming. This was when his act escalated. Gallo turned back, looking even more annoyed. "Listen, Ms. Williams, your record is clean, but I don't like your attitude. I'll give you a chance. I can just write you a ticket. Or we can make things a lot worse." "I don't understand," Evelyn said, playing the role of a confused woman. "I'm sure I stopped." Her polite protest was just the excuse Gallo needed. "Oh, so you're calling me a liar?" he roared, his tone changing abruptly. "You're resisting a police officer! Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" Evelyn complied. As she stepped out, Novak moved to keep her safe, a tactic to distract her and block her view. "Ma'am, please stay here," Novak said. In that moment, the camera mounted on the rearview mirror, designed to shoot a wide angle toward the driver's door, captured a clear image. Gallo, thinking no one was looking, quickly bent down. His hand reached into the car and dropped a small zip-top bag containing white powder under the driver's seat. The action took less than 2 seconds, a practiced move. "I smell something," Gallo announced dramatically, standing up straight. "I smell marijuana. I have reasonable cause to believe there are drugs in your car. I'm going to search it." He pretended to search for a moment, moving things around in the car, then exclaimed triumphantly when he discovered the bag he had just placed in it. "Aha! What is this, Miss Williams? Looks like cocaine to me." He held the bag up in front of Evelyn. "You're in big trouble, lady. You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance." He handcuffed her. The cold handcuffs clamped down on her wrists, and Evelyn felt a cold anger rise up. But she fought it back. She was still Elaine Williams, a frightened and confused writer, and she began to sob. She was taken to the Northgate police station, a filthy old building that smelled of sweat and bleach. She went through the process quietly, fingerprinted, photographed. She refused to have an attorney, saying she couldn't afford it. She watched everything, the way the other officers laughed and congratulated Gallo, the way the dispatcher handed her the business card of a bail attorney named Sal, the way they said her car had been towed by Northgate Towing. Every piece of the puzzle fit together perfectly. The climax came when Deputy Sheriff Frank Donovan walked through the interrogation room and saw Gallo writing a report. "Another fish, Mark?" Donovan asked with a smirk, not bothering to look at Evelyn sitting on a nearby bench. "Yes, sir," Gallo said proudly. "A tough fish, possession of cocaine." Donovan patted Gallo on the shoulder, a gesture both friendly and protective. "Good job, Mark. Keep these guys rolling, they're easy cows to milk. Keep our arrest numbers looking good." Evelyn, sitting on the bench, heard it all, and so did the tape recorder in her shirt pocket. She had what she needed. Now all she had to do was let this corrupt system expose itself in the bright lights of a courtroom, and that's when we return to the courtroom, where the prey is about to shed its sheepskin and bare its fangs. After Evelyn Reed revealed her identity and flashed her shiny Justice Department badge, the room held its breath. Judge Klein, after a moment of shock, regained his composure as a 30-year veteran. He knew this was something more than a simple drug case. He looked down at the badge, then into Evelyn's steady eyes. "Detective Reed," he said, his voice now carrying a distinct note of caution and respect. "This is a highly unusual development. The court requires an explanation." "Of course, Your Honor," Evelyn said, putting away her badge. Her voice was no longer that of a frightened Elaine Williams, but that of a seasoned federal investigator, sharp and authoritative. "I am not the only defendant here today. I believe the real defendants are Officer Mark Gallo, Officer Chris Novak, and the entire corrupt system they represent, a system that has poisoned this city for years." Gallo jumped up from his chair, his face red with anger and fear. "I object. Your Honor, this is nonsense. She's making up stories to try to get out of it. She's lying." "Sit down, Officer Gallo," Judge Klein roared, raising his voice for the first time that day. "She has the words now, and I advise you to keep quiet or you will be held in contempt of court. Go on, Inspector." Evelyn nodded to the judge. "Thank you, sir. For the past 6 weeks, the United States Department of Justice has been conducting an undercover investigation into the activities of the Northgate Police Department, codenamed Operation Collapse. My arrest was not an accident. It was a premeditated part of the first phase of the investigation. She began to present systematically, without paperwork. Each word a hammer blow to the careers and freedom of Gallo and Novak. The 2012 Toyota Camry I was driving, which was towed by Northgate Towing for an exorbitant fee, was equipped with 4 high-resolution hidden cameras and FBI recording equipment. We have clear multi-angle video footage of Officer Gallo planting a bag of flour, confirmed by our lab, into my car while Officer Novak intentionally distracted me. That video is now in the possession of the U.S. Attorney's Office in this state. Gallo's face blanched. He touched his collar as if it were squeezing his throat. He looked at Novak, who looked like he was about to throw up. Cameras? They were filming? Impossible. Evelyn continued, without hesitation, her voice cold and precise. Furthermore, in the 3 weeks before my arrest, as Elaine Williams, a writer investigating working-class hardships, I secretly recorded conversations with more than 20 other victims of Officer Gallo and his network, people who had been pulled over without cause, threatened, and forced to pay huge fees to the same towing company and the same bail attorney. We had evidence of a clear pattern of racketeering. She paused for a second, letting the weight of the word racketeering permeate the air of the courtroom. Then she delivered the final blow, the decisive blow. She looked directly at Deputy Sheriff Frank Donovan, who was sitting in the front row of officials, his face turning from red to ashen. "And most importantly, Your Honor," Evelyn said, "the pen I used to sign the report at the Northgate police station was a sophisticated recording device provided by the NSA. It is capable of picking up clear audio within a 20-foot radius, even in a noisy environment. It recorded Deputy Chief Donovan's entire conversation, in which he not only congratulated Officer Gallo on my arrest, but also said something that I quote verbatim, and that will haunt this city for a long time. Keep pushing these guys. They're easy cows. Keep our numbers looking good." A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Donovan looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He tried to stand, stammering incoherent protests, but his legs gave out. He had been caught by a pen. Just as Evelyn finished speaking, a loud, decisive knock sounded at the back of the courtroom. The door opened, and a group of about half a dozen men and women in dark suits, moving with the cool efficiency of people who know their job, entered. They were FBI agents. Leading them was a tall, blonde woman, the state's U.S. Attorney, Amanda Hayes, Mrs. Hayes walked straight to the judge's podium, not looking at anyone else. "Good morning, Judge Miller," she said. "I apologize for interrupting your hearing, but we have some business to attend to." She handed the judge a stack of documents. "These are signed arrest warrants. Based on the overwhelming evidence provided by Justice Department Inspector Evelyn Reed as part of an ongoing federal investigation, we hereby arrest Officer Mark Gallo and Officer Chris Novak on charges of evidence planting, perjury, extortion, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations." 2 large FBI agents approached the prosecutor's table. "Stand up," one said to Gallo. "Put your hands behind your back." Gallo and Novak were handcuffed on the spot. In front of the judge, they had lied to. In front of the prosecutor, they had deceived. The humiliation was complete and swift. But Mrs. Hayes wasn't done. She turned back, looking straight into the front row. "And Deputy Chief Frank Donovan," she said, her voice as cold as ice. "You are also under arrest for participation in a RICO organized criminal organization, public corruption, and obstruction of justice." 2 more agents stepped forward and handcuffed Donovan, who finally stood up, shaking and staggering. "You can't do this," he muttered. "I'm the deputy sheriff." "You were a deputy sheriff," Mrs. Hayes said coldly. Evelyn stood there, watching the scene unfold, She did not look triumphant, only weary and determined. She had done her job. She had turned the rock over and exposed the maggots beneath. "This is not the end," she told the stunned judge. "This is just the beginning. The Department of Justice, at the direction of the Attorney General, will conduct a comprehensive and far-reaching investigation into the practices, policies, and culture of the entire Northgate Police Department." Her words were a verdict on an entire system. The trial of Elaine Williams was over, but the trial of the Northgate Police Department was just beginning. The DOJ investigation tore through the Northgate Police Department like a Category 5 hurricane. Operation Down became one of the largest police corruption probes in years, closely followed by the national media. Federal agents took over a floor of the City Hall and turned it into their command center. They questioned hundreds of officers and employees, reviewed thousands of hours of body cam and body-worn video, and analyzed terabytes of computer data. The consequences were dire and far-reaching. More than 30 officers were suspended or forced into early retirement. 17 people, including Gallo, Novak, Donovan, and the towing company owner and bail attorney, were criminally charged with federal crimes. The police chief, though not directly involved in the corruption scheme, was forced to resign in disgrace for his incompetence and willful ignorance of the obvious signs. More importantly, the district attorney's office was forced to create a task force to review thousands of cases handled by Gallo and other corrupt officers over the past decade. As a result, more than 50 people who had been wrongly convicted, mostly for minor drug offenses, have walked free. Their lives were ruined by a corrupt system, and now they have a chance to start over, along with financial compensation from the city. In federal court, Mark Gallo and Frank Donovan, faced with overwhelming evidence, were convicted on all counts. The federal judge, in sentencing, called their actions a heinous betrayal of their oath and public trust. Donovan was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Gallo received 12 years. Chris Novak, who cooperated fully with investigators and testified against his co-conspirators, received a lighter sentence of 3 years. A few months later, Evelyn Reed was standing in her office in the Robert F. Kennedy Department of Justice building in Washington, D.C. She was looking out the window at the Lincoln Memorial, where words about equality and justice were carved into marble. The work at Northgate was finished. The city was now undergoing a major overhaul under the supervision of a federally appointed monitor. She was preparing for her next assignment, in another city, under a different cover. There was a stack of files on her desk, but at the top was a handwritten letter on a sheet of lined paper. It was from Mrs. Jackson, a Northgate woman whose 19-year-old son, Marcus, had been framed by Gallo and spent 8 months in prison before being exonerated by Evelyn's investigation. "Dear Inspector Reed," the letter read, "I don't know how to thank you. You gave me my son back. You gave him his life back. You gave me back my faith in justice, a faith I thought was long dead. God bless you and your work." Evelyn read the letter, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself a small smile, a smile of relief and satisfaction. Her work was hard. It was lonely. It was dangerous. It had robbed her of a normal life. But moments like this, little slips of gratitude and justice, made it all worth it. The fight was not over. There would always be another Northgate, another Gallo, another Donovan. But today, they had won an important battle, and she was ready for the next. Corruption and prejudice can spread like a cancer through a system, turning its defenders into predators. They thrive in the shadows, relying on the silence of their victims and the cover-ups of their accomplices. But even the most impregnable corrupt system can crumble like a house of cards in the face of the light of truth. Sometimes, all it takes is one brave, patient, and incredibly intelligent person willing to walk into the tiger's den, not with a gun, but with a badge and an unshakable belief in the oath they swore. What do you think of Evelyn Reed's undercover investigation method where she has to turn herself into bait? Does the end justify the means? Besides Gallo, Novak, and Donovan, who do you think bears the most responsibility for the demise of the Northgate Police Department? Does this story give you hope or pessimism about the possibility of reforming law enforcement from within?